Today I'm going to show you my approach to soundproofing a couple of alcoves. Hiya folks, and welcome back to our 1920s semi-detached house renovation project. And as part of this project, what we want to do is soundproof as many of the alcoves as possible. It's one of those jobs that since we're doing a renovation, it makes sense doing it now. There's never going to be a better time than this to do it. So I've got two alcoves in here to do, one alcove in here just because of where the chimney breast happens to be. There's only one alcove in this room. And then downstairs, I've got these alcoves to do either side of the main chimney breast in the living room. But this is going to be a different video because I'm going to tackle this one in a slightly different way, and I'll talk about that later on. Now, I'm not going to go into the science of soundproofing in a lot of detail in this video because I've already gone into that in quite a bit in a different video about the studio room that I'm building. I'll include a link in the description to that video, so if you want to know a little bit more about the detail of how soundproofing works, then please watch that, and please also remember that soundproofing has nothing to do with egg boxes. I would also like to give a big shout out and massive thank you to soundstop.co.uk, who have very kindly sent me all the materials to do this project. I'm not being paid anything to make this video, it's not sponsored. Soundstop have no control over the content that I'm putting out. One of the things I really like about Soundstop is that they've got a really good calculator on their website where you basically just put in the dimensions of the walls that you want to soundproof, and then it will calculate and tell you all of the materials that you need for doing it. So I'll quickly show you around the Soundstop website because there's some quite nifty tools on here to help you decide what you're going to need. Obviously I'm soundproofing a wall here, and then if you scroll down it says compare solutions. So I'm just going to click start here, and then there's a comparison table. And if you click into that, and you can expand on each of these. So I'm going for the Genie Clip Direct to Wall method. If you do expand, and it shows you how much extra thickness it adds on to the depth of your wall. I'm doing the TechSound 50 upgrade, which adds 68mm to the thickness and gives an overall system noise reduction level of 53 decibels, which is fine for me. But obviously you can uprate it even more, go for the SBX upgrade, that gives 56 decibels. And then if you can afford the space, you could go for the Genie Clip Stud Wall method. If you look at this, you can get system performance of up to 74 decibels. That adds 199mm of thickness onto your wall. Obviously there's pros and cons to all of these depending on how much space you can afford to lose from your room and the overall cost of the system. But I'll show you, for example, a comparison between the TechSound 50 and the SBX upgrade. I'm just going to click on Genie Clip Direct to Wall, and then if I scroll down, we've got TechSound 50 upgrade here. If I just click on that, and we're going to go for 2.6 meter tall. I don't know why it says length. That should be height really. 2.6 meters high by 1 meter per alcove, so I'm going to do that again. Each alcove's about 1 meter-ish, and then we just do calculate, and it gives you a full list of everything that you need. Now obviously go through this with a fine-tooth comb and double check that this is correct. I'll tell you about that in a second, but it gives you a rough idea of what the overall system cost's going to be. As you can see, £310 there. If I just go back and I change that to the SBX upgrade instead, you can see the areas are still saved there. So if I do calculate, you can see that that solution is £377. So it's a bit more expensive. I don't particularly want to go down that route for this particular room, but it's an option if you wanted to. So I'm just going to do back, and we'll go back to the TechSound 50 upgrade to calculate. And as I say, just double check. For example, I don't need jointing tape and finishing compound because we're getting the room skimmed. Acoustic sealant, you're going to need way more than 2 tubes. For the best will in the world, honestly, buy as much of that as you can afford because you're going to need it. I would buy 10 tubes of it to be on the safe side. 7 furring strips, I don't think that would be enough. I think you would need at least 4 per side. You'll see the way that I'm doing it, but just work it out. You can go through the installation instructions and work it out for yourself how many you're going to need. Double check you've got the right number of Genie clips. They're only £2.85 each, so it's worth getting a few extra ones. You can see what are the big ticket items here. For example, the TechSound £51.95 for the text sound plus VAT. Once you're happy with everything, just do add to basket, and if you've got any problems you can get in touch with them and give them a ring and have a chat about your particular solution. Right, let's make a start on this. So the main thing I want to do in these two bedrooms is to reduce airborne sounds, so things like dogs barking and children shouting and music being played and all that sort of thing. I'm not creating a soundproof room or anything like that. I'm just trying to reduce the amount of sound getting through these two alcoves in this particular room. And as such, you know, it needs to be good, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Soundproofing is one of those things you can keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it for incremental differences. But as long as you get a few key things right, then you should get some quite noticeable benefits from this kind of method of soundproofing alcoves. One of the key things when you're doing a soundproofing project is to try and isolate the new wall that you put in from the old wall, and I'm using these sound isolation clips that Soundstop provided. These ones are known as Genie clips, and basically what happens is they go on the wall kind of like that, and then there's a metal furring channel that goes between all of the clips, and that keeps the new wall isolated from the old wall. So as per usual, it's all in the preparation. So what I've done to start off with, I've filled any holes in the wall just to give the wall a bit of a head start. If you've already got holes in the wall that are going to potentially let sound through, then I would suggest that you fill them with either plaster, or if they're really deep holes, then fill them with mortar, like a sand cement mix. I'm also going to put some plasterboard on the ceiling just here because I'm busy insulating the ceiling, and if I do that area, it'll give me a nice flat edge to run the new wall up against. And what I've also done as well, and this isn't a compulsory step, but it's probably going to help matters, is that I've put some sound deadening material under the floor. What you've just got to consider is once we've got this new wall up, it's going to be difficult to get these floorboards up. So if I'm ever going to be running sound deadening material under this section of floor, now's the time to do it. I may do it under the whole floor. I haven't decided yet. It's just once the new wall's up, it's going to be really difficult to get these floorboards up. Again, over on the other alcove, there was a built-in unit original to the house that went all the way back to the brickwork. So I've filled all of the plaster back to the brickwork. I've brought it a little bit around the corner here. It doesn't need to go all the way out because this new wall's going to end kind of here-ish, and then that'll give a surface for when the chimney breast gets dotted and dabbed. In terms of marking stuff out, they suggest no more than 150mm from the bottom and the top. So I've marked a level 150mm point on both sides at the bottom. And then they suggest no more than 600 vertically between clips. So I've actually gone 550, and it just makes it a slightly tighter gap for squishing the insulation into the gap. In terms of horizontal placement, I think they recommend no further than 1200 apart, or 1000 if possible. This works out at 1080, which will be absolutely fine. 150 from the bottom, 550, 550, 550, and then I've had to go 400 and 370, and that's just to account for the slope of the ceiling, because I wanted to make sure that I've got a clip as far to the left as possible up there and another clip just over on that kind of corner there. I've gone for exactly the same placement on the right hand side, and then in the other room I've marked it out exactly the same again. 150 from the bottom, 550 gap vertically. I've just marked on the left hand side a nice plumb line going all the way from the floor to the ceiling. Same on both sides, and then I've just split the difference and come to the middle. I've no idea what distance that is, but it's about, I think it's about a metre actually. I think it's pretty much 1000. I still need to shove some PIR in that gap between the joists up there, and then I can shove some plasterboard over the top, and then we can start putting this whole system together. Oh yeah, one other thing I forgot to mention, if you've got any electrics that you're running in, then now's the time to make sure you've got the cables in the right place. We're going to deal with that a little bit later on, how we're going to handle the electric sockets and whatnot. I haven't actually decided what size screws to use yet. I'm thinking kind of 2" or thereabouts, so 2 or 3". Let's have a look. If we go for, maybe the 3" would work quite well. These are just 3" Quicksilver screws here, but let's see, that's quite long actually. It's probably a bit too long. What's the next down? I think these are 2.5". I wanted long enough to get obviously through the clip and to get a good fixing into the wall past the plaster, because the plaster is quite thick, but maybe that is a good length. Let's have a look at the 2.5 inch. Yeah, I think the 2.5 inch is going to be more than enough. So these are 10 gauge 2.5 inch screws. I'm just going to use red wall plugs. That'll be absolutely fine for what I'm doing here. They suggest that when you screw the screws into the clips, you do not over tighten them. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to let it grip, and then I'm probably going to do another quarter turn, half turn, but no more than that. You don't want to over tighten the clips. Let's get cracking. So just to show you what I'm doing here, I've made a full cutting list of all of the fairing bars so I can do them all in one go basically. And I've labelled every single one up so I know where they're going. That means bedroom 2 left-hand alcove, that's bedroom 2 right-hand alcove, that's bedroom 1, and I've marked the lengths on all of them, and the lengths are written on the wall as well, so it's obvious where everything goes. All I would say is when you buy these fairing strips, sometimes they do get like a little bit bashed around in the post and things, so for example, like I've got the odd one like this where the end's just a little bit bent. You could easily bend it back, but all I've done is I've made sure that if there is any damaged bits, the damaged bits are the offcuts. If you are using a circular saw to cut them, make sure that you know what you're doing and you're wearing all the proper PPE, because really nasty shards of metal can come off this when you're cutting them. I'm used to this saw and I've used it a lot, and it is a special metal cutting blade that's in it as well. And by the way, no, I'm not trying to look cool. Once again, my normal safety glasses have completely vanished from the face of the planet, so the only ones I've got are tinted ones. So I'm going to pop some gloves on because these do have sharp edges, and we'll get these fitted. They're dead easy to fit. You just pop it in the bottom bar, give it a bit of a squeeze, and then it locates in really easily. I'll try and actually put that in the right place. What you want to make sure is that the bar isn't touching the walls. So I'll just try and show you one-handed on this one. So all I'm doing is I'm leaving probably about a 5 or 10 mil gap at the end. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to be putting screws right at the end there. And then just give it a squeeze. That's that side in. Same on the other side. That's it. Easy as that. There we go, dead easy. All the fairing bars are in for this room. Next job, I need to put some acoustic insulation in between all the fairing strips, and then we can get our first layer of plasterboard on. And then I'm going to put the Texsound membrane over the top of the first layer of plasterboard. I'm going to seal all of the edges and whatnot with acoustic sealant, and then get the final layer of plasterboard over the top. Right, just to show you the story so far, we're on to the next day now. It took us about half a day. I started late yesterday on this, so it took us about half a day to get all of the clips in, all of the fairing bars in, all of the insulation in. I haven't filmed putting the insulation in because it's pretty straightforward. You cut it to size and just kind of squish it in there and hope that it doesn't fall down. So as I think... Nearly fell down a hole. So as I think I mentioned earlier, it's Rockwool 50mm acoustic insulation that's going in behind there. So back to the 4 essential principles of soundproofing: decoupling, damping, mass and absorption. What the insulation is doing here is damping and absorption. So it's stopping the plasterboard from resonating, because if you just had a gap behind there, potentially the plasterboard would resonate and then just pass sound straight through to the wall behind it. So it's providing damping, and it's also providing absorption as well. It'll absorb a certain amount of the sound. We've got decoupling from the genie clips and the fairing bars. And the final stage is to build up the mass. And the mass is going to come from 2 layers of acoustic plasterboard with the Texsound membrane in between. This Texsound stuff, it's unbelievably heavy. I can only just pick up that roll. The boarding's going to be a little bit tricky because it's all going to have to be scribed to the wall. What we want to do is leave a 5mm gap all the way around, because what we don't want, coming back to the decoupling, is that we don't want the plasterboard to be touching the outside wall or the floor or the ceiling, or the inside wall for that matter. So we want a 5mm gap all the way around. That'll then get filled with acoustic sealant. So it does unfortunately mean scribing the plasterboard, which is a little bit of a pain, but it's just got to be done. Everything's prepped and ready. I've marked out, this is a really important stage, I've marked out where the center of each fairing strip is. So can you see this little line that I've put? I've done that on every single fairing strip so that I know where they are, basically. So they're all marked out on both walls, so once the boards are on, I know I can still find the fairing strip. And as I say, same in this room, all the insulation's in and everything's marked out, ready for the plasterboard going on. As I say, 1 layer of plasterboard, Texsound over the top, plasterboard over the top of the Texsound, and then final skim plaster that we've got the plasterer coming in to do. He'll be skimming the entire room. And as I say, before the plasterer comes in and does that, all of the edges will be sealed with acoustic sealant. So the first layer of plasterboard is now on and it's all sealed around the edges as well. I'm just using fire-made intumescent sealant. It's got acoustic properties and sound deadening properties. It's just what Soundstop happen to provide, but use whatever acoustic sealant you want to use. This stuff's dead cheap, so I'm sure it'll do the job. You don't need to be particularly precious about how it looks. The key thing here is that we're sealing up all of the air gaps, and we're also making sure that we've maintained a gap all the way around the first layer of plasterboard. So we've got a 5mm gap. I haven't filmed doing all of this because it is a bit of a nightmare of a job on an old house where you're having to scribe it around the wall. You can see where I've had to scribe it all the way around. It took ages, but got there in the end. And the main thing is then afterwards that you just seal up all of the gaps all the way around the floor as well. 5mm gap at the bottom there around the floor, and as I say, none of the plasterboard is touching the walls or the ceiling or the floor. I don't know if you need to seal between the boards, but I did. And then the next job after that is the text sound mass loaded vinyl. I thought this was going to be an absolute nightmare, but actually it's been the easiest part of the job so far. It's actually quite forgiving to work with. Think very sticky chewing gum. It's unbelievably heavy, so cut it into kind of manageable chunks and manageable sizes, but yeah, it's very sticky. It sticks to anything, so try not to stick it onto anything that you don't want it to stick to, but it's got this weird kind of stretchy consistency to it, and it's actually quite forgiving, quite easy to work with, I think. So I just started, you should probably start at the top and work down, but I had this socket to work around. So I started kind of halfway up the wall and worked down from there to the floor. And then I worked my way up, and then all I did was an overlap in the middle, and then I cut through both pieces, removed the back piece, and then that gives you your perfect join, a bit like wallpapering. So I'm going to get the text sound onto this other alcove, and then I'll get the second layer of plasterboard in, and then I need to tackle the other room as well, and then I'll come back to you once it's all done. For the socket, I'm hoping you can see this because it's not very easy to film, but all I've done, I've fed the cable through all 3 layers, and all I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop the back box the wrong way around just so I can get a level kind of hole. So I'm just going to mark that. And then I'm just going to very delicately cut that out with the multi-cutter, being very careful not to hit these cables because that would be a very bad day. So I just very tentatively went layer by layer through that, and as you can see, X marks the spot. I've cleared out the insulation and everything, and then I'm going to backfill that with mass loaded vinyl before putting the actual socket back in. This is where having a tiny spirit level comes in very handy. And then the remaining part, I'm just lining with, and then the remaining bit, I'm just lining it all with the mass loaded vinyl, trying not to cover the lugs up that you're going to need access to, like I've just done. I'll just try and show you what I'm doing in here. It's difficult to film it, but I'm just completely lining the back box with the text sound. You can get a special putty for doing this, but I'm sure the tech sound will be absolutely fine for this. The back box is really deep in the wall, so I've got loads of space to play with. So I'm going to put a little bit more tech sound at the back, and then I'll show you once it's all done and ready to be wired up by the Sparky. There's about, 3 or 4 layers of tech sound in there, and then any gaps that I couldn't get the tech sound into, I've just filled with the acoustic sealant. I've been really careful to make sure that you can still get to both lugs, and the lugs aren't like blocked up with sealant, and you can still get to the earth connector as well. So that's all ready for the Sparky to wire things up. And that is us all done, ready for the plasterer to do his final skim coat, and the chimney's all getting redone and whatnot. So that'll be blocked up, so everything sound-wise in terms of sound isolation and soundproofing that can be done to a reasonable level has been done in this room. And I can tell you, hand on heart, it's already a noticeable difference. Next door I've got dogs, and it doesn't really bother with anything, but normally you can occasionally hear the dogs barking and things, but you can't hear anything now at all. It's working really well. So we've got the double layer acoustic plasterboard with the Tech Sound SY50 in between, all attached to the Genie clip isolation system on the resilient bars. And as I say, this is a direct to wall method. I've sealed around all of the edges with acoustic sealant. I've treated the back of the socket with acoustic sealant, and that's now ready for the electrician to wire up after the plaster has been. I haven't put any acoustic sealant on that gap there because, as I say, the wall's getting skimmed anyway, so I don't want to put too much acoustic sealant on in case the plaster has any problems sticking to it. Through into the front bedroom, and this is the bigger single alcove that we've got in here, and this wall is all done as well. Exactly the same as the other room, so we've got everything is acoustically sealed around every edge apart from the centre edges because, again, this wall's getting skimmed. I made a bit of a mess of the scribe up at the top corner there, but it doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine and it's working really well. Again, now in this room I can't hear anything from next door anymore. So once again, double layer acoustic plasterboard with the Sound SY50 in between, all held against the Genie clip system. Novel use for space plugs here. I'm just using it to hold the Sound up against the sealant while the sealant dries. But once again, all treated with Sound inside the socket back and behind the socket back and whatnot as well. All ready for the plasterer and electrician to do their bits. Once again, a massive thank you to Soundstop for providing some of the materials for this job. You can go and check them out. There's a link in the description below and in the pinned comment as well. So thank you once again to the guys at Soundstop. Awesome work. Don't forget to hit subscribe as well, because this is my next job and I'm going to be acoustically treating the alcoves in the living room. This is going to get a little bit more of an extreme treatment, and I'm going to build, well, it's going to be the stud wall method. So there's going to be a stud wall at the back there. It's going to be isolated from the actual back wall, and then we're going to apply the same treatment that we did in the upstairs bedrooms. And because we've got that extra level of isolation using the stud wall, we should find that this is an even more soundproof solution than the solution that I've used upstairs. Although I have to say, I'm very, very impressed with the direct to wall method. It's worked really, really well. Relatively straightforward. It took me about half a day to do all of the Genie clip work and fitting all the resilient bars, the fairing bars and whatnot. And then it took about a day per room to do all of the alcove work. I'm expecting this room's going to take a little bit longer because I've got the stud wall to build, but we shall see. Anyway, pop any questions or suggestions in the comments below. Take care, folks, and I shall see you next time. Tatty bye!